RewatchaBulls episode, I don't know how many now that we've done. And this is really important because it's not only the RewatchaBulls, it's also sort of the RewatchaBullets. Yeah. Before they were the Wizards. That's House. He's got his pennant in the background. We're very excited to see him. Bill Simmons, may have heard of him. He's also on this podcast as well. So this team, this Bulls team, won 69 games. They'd won the title the year before. Jordan, kind of the full return here. It's weird because they lost a few at the end of the season, and people kind of felt like they were vulnerable. And the way I remember this series is that you have a 23-year-old Juwan Howard, a 23-year-old Chris Webber, Rod Strickland, a.k.a. the Pod Strickland, is also their main, their third scorer with this. And the whole thing, the story afterwards was how vulnerable are the Bulls now because the Bullets gave them kind of a series. And man, how many titles are the Bullets going to win? Like, that was one of those things. It was one of those first-round young team groups that we go, man, in 3 years, the rest of the league is going to be trying to catch the Bullets. So let's actually start with House because this is your squad.
I have to confess, as we get going here, that there was no moment in either game one or game two that I thought that the Bullets were actually going to win the game. But I was just so happy to be there. The Bullets had not been in the playoffs since the 80s. And the trajectory for this team was greatly improved, shockingly, by the addition of Rod Strickland over the summer of 96. They traded Sheed, and, Sheed was obviously very promising at the beginning of his career. But they had Juwan and Chris there, and they're like, let's get somebody who can facilitate those guys. It was a good move for those Bullets at that point in time. Now, they started off that 96-97 season at 22 and 24 and got Jim Lynam fired. So, I don't know, maybe not the best kickoff. But then they went on a nice run. They finished the season 19 and 7. In March and April. They won the last game of the season, got into these playoffs, and Strickland was really important to that run. They were running the offense with him in the low post, and we'll get to this when we go through the whole breakdown. The one thing they couldn't do with Strickland against the Bulls was put him in the low post because MJ closed that shit off.
That trade, the trade of Strickland for Rasheed, is a trade that just is trapped in that decade. There's only one decade in NBA history where that trade happens, and it happens for all these different, that's the too fast, too soon, too much era, or whatever it's called. But the rookie scale, it doesn't exist yet. And you have these guys, you're terrified they're going to leave after 1 year, 2 year, 3 years. People have opt-outs in their deals. They traded Rasheed. Here's the trade, July 15th, 1996. Rod Strickland and Harvey Grant for Mitchell Butler and Rasheed Wallace. Rasheed had only been in the league a year and was good.
Yeah.
And, I think part of it had to do with the Juwan and Chris and Rasheed. They're basically all the same position. But that's just a trade. Nobody would ever trade a really good rookie after a year. Russillo, with that, in 2020, it's never happening ever because you have this guy on this contract for 5 years, especially if he's good. That's like the best asset you would have. Back then, this trade actually made sense. And you mentioned how good Strickland was this year. He was second team All-NBA in 98. And this is ahead of real guys. Like that year, the guards were Gary Payton and Jordan. Second team was Tim Hardaway and Strickland. Third team was Reggie Miller and Mitch Richmond. So Strickland was a top 10 player in the league the following year. It's a defensible trade, but man, Rasheed was really good too.
There's a few things going through all that stuff because I got caught in the Webber wormhole of all of his transactions too, which kind of overshadowed the Rasheed thing. The fact that you had Juwan, Rasheed, and Webber on the same team it's close,
ludicrous,
where they'd all been drafted, within years of each other, it doesn't make any sense. But as you point out, Bill, how NBA owners actually allowed this to happen where you could opt out and become a restricted free agent. That's the whole reason why Webber was out of Golden State. Now, granted, Webber didn't like Don Nelson. Don Nelson, after they traded the penny pick and 3 first-rounders, one that went out to 7 years later, I remember reading a quote where Ainge was like, that's the most insane trade ever because it's penny and then it's 3 first-rounders. And then because as you go through it, like Weber's like, I'm going to opt out. Like, think of trading 3 firsts for a pick that could then opt out because they didn't have that rookie scale. Like, this isn't 1940. I can't believe, like, have you done more work on this, Bill, on how this actually, I imagine the agents just got over on all the owners and people didn't really feel like they were that unprotected, where in fact,
no,
like
it's a Stern
the
thing.
90s was nuts with this stuff.
It's a Stern fuck up. The early 90s, whatever deal they had in place, they just didn't see it coming. And the rookies coming into the league were just making way too much money and had way too much leverage. And they didn't know how to tilt it. And it wasn't really until the 99 lockout that they were able to reset it. But think about some of the stuff that happened. Weber, after 1 year at Golden State, after all they gave up for him, was able to force a trade. Allen Houston in Detroit was there 3 years and became a free agent and went to the Knicks. He was like, if you're Detroit, you have him and Grant Hill. That's the foundation for something really good. And he's gone. And then, House, a bullet, no pun intended, that you felt like you dodged, but in retrospect, maybe you didn't. Because I really want to have are we sure Juwan Howard was even good at basketball conversation in a second? But remember, Miami almost tried to give him $100 million, and there was some sort of tampering or something illegal about the contract. He ended up staying. You end up keeping Juwan for a lot of money and then trading Rashid for Strickland. You actually might have been better off losing Juwan, keeping Rashid, and then instead of Strickland, just signing some point guard, right? Like, the fact that you got stuck with Juwan, in retrospect, actually sucked for you.
And ultimately, that Juwan contract was part of the reason that they ended up trading Weber. They concluded that Weber and Juwan were playing too much of the same position. They'd already sunk the money into Juwan, and then that made Weber expendable, so to speak. And there was other stuff going on that made the Chris Weber expendable, but that money point is a problem.
Russillo, when they get Weber, when they trade Googs and they trade the 3 first-round picks, wasn't that the trade?
Yeah.
And House loved Googs. Let's be honest. Like that was Googs had a very similar game to House, ironically. So
who was better though?
House. So Goog shows up in DC and he's got, he's like, you're not sure if he's a small forward or a power forward. He's got this weird little 18-foot post-up game, very similar to House. So House was very connected to him. They make the big Weber trade. They have Juwan, and House and I love the Fab Five. I mean, absolutely love them, talked about them constantly. And the door was open for Jalen. It was sitting there. Remember, Jalen was like floundering in Denver. And I remember us talking about it in the mid-90s, and you're like, man, Jalen's sitting there. If we get Jalen, it's the Fab Five. We bringing it back. This could happen. And then Indiana ended up stealing him. But I think Juwan's stock, let's just have the conversation now. It was so high in college, and he made so much sense as like a college center, like his game. But then you think about him in the NBA, like, what was he? They say it in this telecast. It's like, well, Juwan's not really a post-up player. Well, what was he? He was like an 18-foot jump shooter, which we now know 20 years later is the worst shot in basketball. If you look at his stats, he's 45, 46% every year, basically. Couldn't shoot threes, couldn't post up, wasn't a really good rebounder, couldn't defend the rim. It's like, what was he? What position was he? I think he's on 8 teams in 10 years.
Juwan definitely benefited from being around later. So it's like we kind of get to remember you differently. But you're right. Like, that contract ultimately becomes like, wait a minute, this guy's not good enough to have gotten this contract, yet everybody wanted him. And I'll remember even back to the draft. When you look at the draft and there's multiple guys from the same team, I remember when Florida had all those dudes. And it's almost as if somebody wants to make the Zag point that just isn't true. It's like, Corey Brewer actually might be the best out of this entire. And they're like, there's no way he's better than Hal Horford. There'll never be a version of Corey Brewer that's ever better than Al Horford. And he wasn't better than peak Joakim Noah. And there was a lot of Juwan stuff that, he actually might be the guy. And in just glimpses of this game 20-something years ago with Weber's so insanely talented it's embarrassing to ever think that anybody could have said anyone else on that Michigan team was better than him, because Weber has flashes. He has like 4 passes in this game, to keeping track of him, going, I can't believe this guy is even doing this. And that's the part of Weber that you're like falling in love with that young version of.
Yeah, he was like Harlem Globetrotters. The big thing for Juwan was the year after Weber left, the 94 year, when they were still really good in Michigan. Juwan was 21-9 that year for Michigan in 40-minute games. So when he came into the league, I thought he was a sure thing. I thought he was going to come in and just be like a Karl Malone type power forward. And then as House started watching him, and I remember us talking about him and House just being like, I'm not sure Juwan's that good. I'm like, really? Like, remember House, you were so frustrated by him.
Well, in retrospect, looking back, it feels like he's kind of like a poor man LaMarcus Aldridge.
Yeah, exactly.
Great face-up game. Now, LaMarcus has a little post-up, but I will say this in Juwan's defense. He arrived with a professional demeanor. He arrived with a commitment to his craft. He arrived and was immediately effective. And he was a net positive to the team as a rookie right away. And in that era, he essentially validated what we saw out of him in that 1994 season. And so making the investment in him and buying that good guy who averaged over 22 points at the time that he re-signed, after David Stern blessedly stepped in for basketball reasons and fixed that trade and sent Juwan back. He was averaging over 22 points. So like an effective face-up scorer, not a top banana. And the problem that you mentioned, Bill, he got paid like a top banana, and that's what puts you in the worst kind of position.
Well, and he also, Russillo had the 95-96 season. He makes the All-Star team, 22 a game. He's playing with Rasheed as a rookie. The one great George Mirasan season. George Mirasan, 76 games, 14.5 points, 9.6 rebounds.
Yeah, Mirasan was actually okay, which is
really
scary because in this game he isn't, and he runs.
No,
and you're
I
like,
think he's beaten up.
Yeah, that's when you're watching him in this game. You're like, how does he not just break, like fall over in half and break, and they have to come in with like a stretcher and pick up pieces of him.
It's a great point. I'm only going to interrupt you for 1 second. He did not play game 3, and he did not play one game in 97-98 because the summer after those playoffs, he went to film My Giant with Billy Crystal, and Billy Crystal ruined his career.
Right, that's true.
And the Bullets Wizards missed the playoffs.
Right. Well, then you go the 95-96 season. One of the reasons Juwan looked so great was Weber only played 15 games. He got hurt. So you never really got to see like the Juwan Weber Wallace thing, and they trade Wallace after that year. We never even really got to see the three of them together. It never happened. I don't like, would it have worked? Would it have not worked? I don't even know, because Rasheed was basically a perimeter forward who could post up. Juwan's a perimeter guy, and Weber liked being in the perimeter. I do feel like there's some world in which you could have played the three of them together, right?
Yeah, 2020. Yeah, 2020, they would have figured it out because they all love to shoot threes. And Rasheed, especially Weber, can both pass. And Juwan falls into my second year theory guy, because people will listen and go, oh, you guys are really beating up on Juwan. Like, look at these numbers. But the thing that always scares me is there's a high pick. His second year, is that his best year? And it is his best year. As you mentioned, the Weber injuries, he's 22-9, or excuse me, 22-8. He plays 41 minutes a game, he starts 81 games. So he plays a full season, he's playing 41 minutes, puts up, and he doesn't touch on those numbers again. The scoring goes down from that point on. And what'll happen a lot is when the team has that clear number one that they hope is that number one, they run the offense through him. They give him far more opportunities. It'll happen with later picks too, where you'll look and say his best production was his second year because the team's trying to figure out if the guy can actually play. And then there's so many players that from that point on, the numbers decline because they go, you know what, we actually can't really run our offense through him. So,
well, to paraphrase Dennis Green, eventually Juwan became what we thought he was, which was 18-7 every night. You couldn't really go to him at the end of games, and you had like Dallas makes the big trade for him eventually. He doesn't put them over the top. After a year, they're like, okay, we're good. They flip him for Rafe LaFrance. Remember Orlando signs him as a free agent in 2003 to put him with T-Mac. and they go 1-10. Doc Rivers gets fired. Then he's in the Steve Francis T-Mac trade. He ends up in Houston for 4 and starts bouncing around. But it makes sense when you look at his stats, because if you're just looking at what his career was, knowing what we know now in 2020, those are the type of guys you really kind of didn't want to pay big money for. The 18-7 guys who they didn't give you great defense. They can't stretch the floor. Like, what are they? And speaking of questions, House, what happened in 95, 96? You had both Price brothers. You had Liddell Eccles. You had Robert Pack. You had Chris Whitney, Jim McIlvaine 1 year before Seattle, like inexplicably overpaid him. You had Kevin Pritchard's on that team. They had 21 guys that year.
Great era. I will only say this about the Price brothers. The better Price, Mark Price, I think played one game. He played less than 10 games for the Bullets.
Seven games.
Yeah, they traded for him and then found out he had plantar fasciitis, and it kept him out almost the entirety of his time with Washington.
Didn't you trade somebody good for him? Now I'm going to look this up. See, this is already way bigger of a deep dive than I was expecting. You traded... Oh, my God, House. You traded a first-round pick for him.
It was a pick. That's exactly right.
It was a 1996 first-round pick. You played 7 games. Classic. Was that Wes Unseld?
That was Wes Unseld. Yes, it was.
All right. Yeah, I could go on Juwan. I could go for a Juwan conversation all day. It's almost like you look at some of these guys from that era. Like Antoine was another one. Antoine made so much sense in the late 90s, and now you look back at his stats and stuff, and you're like, wow.
Yeah, Juwan. And by the way, Juwan was less of a problem than Twan was. Like, I think Juwan knew who he was. Twan went completely unchecked as a 1, wondering why this Pierce guy wanted his shots. And Patino was like, as long as you help to rotate defensively every now and then, I don't care if you take pull-up transition threes or your feet aren't even set. Like, go ahead.
Right. And you can see it with Weber in this game too. The guys from this era are unchecked, to use your word. They're just Weber's just Matt Kukoc is inexplicably the lead color analyst for NBC this year, and he's talking about that's the thing with Chris Weber.
Matty Kukoc, you don't like him on this call?
Yeah, it's a number 1 guy. I don't know what were his credentials.
See, that's you. That's why Monday Night Football has problems, because guys like you.
It's guys like me. It is my fault.
Need superstars. And you can't just listen to the analysis.
I thought he's fine, but he's like, well, Chris Weber, one day one play he'll have a great behind the back pass. Next play he'll throw it into the 3rd row, and I was like, that's kind of the perfect summation of Chris Weber. Every once in a while he'll just throw it into the 3rd row, and he just kind of never figured that part out, how to be creative without being reckless. He was always reckless.
Do we do the Weber thing now?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, because it's totally fair. And it's kind of like your Juwan point, where if Juwan ends up on that many teams by 30, isn't the NBA kind of telling us exactly what you've said here in the beginning, that you get him and you go, oh, wait, I thought this guy did a little bit more. And here's Weber, where I think his career is salvaged historically far more because of that Sacramento team. And we feel like, man, that Sacramento team really, they probably should have got one. If we did a what if of the last 20 years, they're probably one of the 5 teams you go, that team probably should have won a ring.
Yeah.
But Weber has 17 points in the first half. He loves a perimeter in this game.
He's awesome. First half, he's awesome.
Rodman's on Juwan, I believe, in this far more. And Rodman's a complete non-factor in the first half of this game. He comes off the bench. He's got the big knee brace. He goes in the back, and then he gets a couple rebounds, a putback, and he's completely energized for a very short stretch. I don't know that he single-handedly turns the game around, but he's a completely different guy for a stretch in the second half, because Rodman's a total non-factor in the first. So it doesn't really have anything to do with the Weber deal. But I do feel like Weber, I don't know if it's an overrated, underrated thing, but I guess there was always like a little thing that was off for me with Weber. And I think there's a hint of it here in this game too, where he's got a wide open 3 late. He's loved that shot the whole game. And then he kicks it to, I think, Chaney in the corner, and they're both wide open and Chaney misses it. And then at the end of the game,
by the way, that was the biggest play of the game, FYI.
Right. And for whatever reason, like, the Bullets still don't understand what to do and foul at the end, which is great to see that pros 20 years ago still didn't know what to do with the clock and whether or not you should foul. But there's a bigger thing with Weber for as insanely talented as he is, and maybe that's why we'd all hold him to kind of the standard. It just felt like there was just something that was a little off at times. And I don't know if you guys think that's fair or not.
So having lived through that era and as a season ticket holder in that era, at that point of his career, Chris Webber was immature. He was both life immature and basketball immature. I mean, Bill made the point a little bit ago. He missed 65 games of the previous season. He ended up playing for 3 coaches in his first 4 years. He had Don Nelson, he had Jimmy Lynam, he had Bickerstaff, and he's still. You don't see a great leap from the level he was playing at Michigan to this point where we're watching this game. The same kind of indecision, the same kind of inclination to float, to sort of like, jump out to the 3-point line. Some of it has to do, I think, with concept. Like Washington had dug in deep on the idea of Strickland as playmaker and Strickland, honestly, as the lead scorer, like the primary scoring option. And the Bulls took that away in game 1 immediately by putting MJ on Strickland, and the Bullets didn't adjust in either game 1 or game 2. You see a lot of Strickland catching the ball below the free throw line in this game too. And, there is some effective moments for Webber as like the point center, point forward at the free throw line as a distributor. And the passes that you mentioned, Russillo, are, beautiful. I mean, he
like
has
stuff
that,
other guys
that,
don't
that
do.
That's right.
Like Tracy Murray is inbounding baseline, and Weber catches it with one hand and volleyball taps it back to Murray as he comes in bounds. And I remember those and seeing it again now. You're going like, what the hell is this guy going to be? And that's why I think some of the Weber stuff, Bill, can feel a little unfair being more critical of him, but it really has more to do with certain glimpses that he gave you going, is this guy going to be, as I always like to say, is this guy going to be a version of something we've never seen before?
House and I did a Book of Basketball podcast about Weber that we haven't run yet, that we taped like 10 months ago.
Wow.
I actually forgot to run it. I forgot to run that one and Dr. J. So I have two pods that have been done for a while. Both of us have such a complicated relationship with Weber. I think ultimately he's a huge disappointment. I also think he's a Hall of Famer. And I think both things could be true. He was a first-team All-NBA guy, I think in 2001, and was one of the best 5 players in the league there for a couple years during an era when Duncan and Garnett and tail end of Karl Malone. Who's the other great forward? Duncan, Garnett. I'm missing somebody. There was one other
early
Duncan, Garnett. Who's the third awesome forward? Rashid's in there. But to be first team All-NBA in that era really matters. And the Kings really almost won the title. At the same time, all the things that drove me crazy about him are on exhibit in game 2, 1997 against the Bulls. He does dumb shit. He floats. He should be down in the low block. He's not. I feel like he could score on, especially Rodman's playing on one leg. He could have scored on any bull.
And Rodman isn't even on him, honestly.
Yeah, right.
He's got Juwan most from what I remember of the game.
Right. He's got like Luke Longley on him, and they throw Brian Williams is guarding him at some point. But to me, the defining moment of Weber in this game, Jordan blows by him on a drive, and Weber reaches around and pokes it out of bounds. And then they cut to Weber, and he's doing that Chris Webber nodding thing, like, "Yeah, I fucking don't pull that shit on me." With Jordan, this is a game where Jordan scores 55 points. He's murdering them the entire game. It's not like he gets hot. It's 26 in the first half, 29 in the second half. The entire game, he's killing them. He beats Weber this drive. Weber pokes it away from him like as a last gasp, and then does don't bring that shit in my house. It's like, you're such a loser. Why are you doing this? You just don't get it. This was the whole 90s for Chris Webber.
This series also, he established a mark that has not yet been matched. Do you know what I'm talking about?
What?
He fouled out of every game in this playoff series, a mark that has not been matched in 38 years.
Dumb fouls, too. He was the master of the dumb foul.
Well, he also didn't get the benefit of the doubt. And there was an element of that. Like, there are touch fouls where they could have let it go.
He's not treated like a superstar.
Yeah.
He was the master of this guy is at the free throw line with 2 minutes and 20 seconds left, and it's a 3-point game, and I know he's going to miss the first free throw. He was the master of, we want you to have the ball at the end of the game because you're our best player, and we have to score on this possession. And he makes technically the right play, but he throws it to Cal Chaney, who can't shoot, for a wide open three that has no chance of going in.
Cal Chaney can shoot. How dare you?
That shot wasn't going in. You weren't watching that going. That shot's going in.
Weber's wide open on it too, by the way.
He was wide open.
Was totally comfortable taking threes earlier in the game, and this one is like can't wait to spin it quick enough.
It wasn't the wrong basketball play, but that was the thing with Weber. It's like most of the time he did make the right decision, but he never seemed to understand. Like, you're the best guy on the floor, and
take the game over.
House's point of him not getting better the entire decade is so true. If you go back and you watch him as freshman at Michigan and a sophomore at Michigan, and you watch him in 1998 on the Wizards, what is better? What improved? How do you not get better in 8 years? You're the most gifted power forward we had. That's frustrating to me.
So I'm going to bring up a point here, which is something that I've always thought about because it was accurate, where it's Garnett in the middle of his Minnesota run. And I don't know if there was some rumor about Weber ending up on the T-Wolves or something like that. Like, who knows? I mean, Weber was another one, not so much with the Sacramento thing, but I mean, he'd already been that was going to be his third team in the Mitch Richmond deal. And then he ends up on a bunch more teams after that too, like that we kind of lose track of. You had a line in a column about, I actually want to see Weber and Garnett play together so they can both pass it back and forth to each other and get a shot clock violation on like a key possession.
I was proud of that one.
So it's a very good one. It's a very good one because I've always had kind of this thing where there's certain players, I don't care that he has 25 and 10. Those last 2 minutes, like if I can tell you don't really want the ball, like it just tells me something about you. And you can kind of see it when you watch it enough with certain players. But Garnett, to be fair about Garnett, like thinking of Garnett now, there's not one part of you that thinks, well, this guy's completely about winning. He has a dog. And I mean, look, he's got more of a dog in him than I think Weber does. But Garnett did have this thing at times where you go, wait, are you like, you're this tough guy. You're swearing at everybody. You start with anyone, well, certain players, and you're all about it. But is there a part where it's like, I really just don't like taking this shot right here?
You have to pull it out of him.
Right. And so Garnett, like he was arguably before the Celtics thing, it's just crazy to think like, actually that guy's not a winner, right? He's not wired that way. And then to see him in Boston, like who's actually wired any better than this person as far as being competitive every single game? I wonder how much of it is, I can't really blame the Sacramento thing because the Sacramento deal was a really good team, but I actually think these two guys were on very similar paths, and based on situation, health, Garnett's the better player too. I don't think we're going to argue that one, but there were some very similar Garnett-Weber criticisms that seem impossible now when you look at the second half of both of their careers.
Well, Garnett shed some of that in 2004 and when they made the playoff run. That was the first time where it was like, all right, take over at the end of these games, and he actually started doing it. But even with the Celtics, and you saw it throughout the 2008 playoffs, and the Atlanta series was a good example of just take over, dude. You have Josh Smith on you. Like,
just shoot a little more.
Just shoot. Just take the game over for us. I think that the fundamental difference between those two guys is what House said, the immaturity thing. Garnett at every point of his career, even when he's like 21 on the T-Wolves, was this fucking maniac competitor. And everybody who's ever played with him is glowing. Everybody. I remember Paul Shirley when he had that little run when he was writing stuff, when he had just finished playing, and he was talking about how if Garnett and Duncan switch places, Garnett would be remembered the same way Duncan is. He would have, all the same things would have happened, and just what an unbelievable competitor he was. He came to Boston, same thing. Guess who we didn't talk about that way, teammates and coaches? Chris Webber. There's nobody like spending hours talking about, oh man, Chris Webber, man, these practices, that dude just wanted to win. Like, it just was not part of the conversation with him. It's a fact.
I mean, that's the takeaway. And the immaturity thing is what led to him being traded. It was the off the court stuff. He was busted for DUI. marijuana. He got pulled over for speeding. He and Juwan were both named in a sexual assault complaint, and
That got dropped.
I know. I'm just saying they were named in it. But it was for the Bullets/Wizards. They were not able to figure out how to pull this guy along developmentally, and they decided to cut bait rather than try and make it work.
House was crushed when they traded it. The Mitch Richmond part. You were so bummed out because it was like Mitch Richmond was great, but you're getting Mitch Richmond like after his peak. It was clear. And all the quotes were about this guy's a professional. You know, we got to bring professionalism back to the Bullets and all this stuff. It's like, well, that's great, but we just traded, you know, an iconically talented power forward who hasn't tapped into his gifts yet. And this is probably a bad idea. We're not winning the title with Mitch Richmond. It was a bummer.
Richmond was 33 years old when he played his first game as a Wizard. And
wow, I don't remember it being that. Wow, because he was so good. But he
was good, but he's 33.
And
the end of his career.
And then they signed him to a 4-year, $40 million contract, which made him the highest paid shooting guard in the National Basketball Association. He made more money than Kobe Bryant and Ray Allen and Reggie Miller at this point in time.
Yeah, but you know what that shows? That shows that franchise takes care of its vets, so other vets will want to go there as a free agent later.
Yeah,
I just love
that drives Russillo crazy.
I love when teams overpay somebody and then their media, like the media that covers just the team, will be like, no, it's actually smart because it just gets the message around the league that they take care of their own.
That's a feature of the Wizards, not a bug.
Richmond goes from 19.7 a game his first Wizards year, shooting a hearty 41% from the field. Drops down to 17.4, a crisp 42.6% from the field. Then 16.2 in his third Wizards season, down to 40.7%. And then ends up on the Lakers in 2002 for the classic kind of cheapy ring where he gets the ring, but it's like, you didn't really play. Like, this isn't really how you wanted it, but hey, at least you got a ring. Tough contract.
By the way,
House.
I went and looked up the 2000, 2001 while you were talking about it, but the other forwards. So Duncan, you know, again, who was actually a power forward still then before he was a center for the rest of his career. He and Weber, first team was Shaq. The guards are Iverson and Kidd. Second team's Kobe and Vince.
That's a great first team All-NBA, by the way.
That's nuts. And just think, Garnett's he's not first team on this.
So who's second team?
So it's Kobe, Vince, and then Dikembe's the center. The forwards are Garnett and McGrady.
Yeah, but that was the one I couldn't remember.
There you
McGrady.
go.
He's like 30 plus a game that year. And Weber beat him out.
You got Ray and Gary Payton. David Robinson's the center, and then Dirk makes a third team here with Karl Malone.
Do you think? All right, so let's try to make the case for Weber just quickly. So he's on that Warriors team.
Did a good job not doing it.
Well, so he's his own worst enemy, right? He's on that Warriors team. That's a really fun Warriors team. And it's got Chris Mullin. It's got Early Sprewell, who was a force of nature back then. Hardaway gets hurt I think that year, but he's going to come back the following year. And I think they had Billy Owens, but it's a fun team. He's got Don Nelson as a coach for the skills that we knew he had as a pro. That was the perfect coach for him. They just clash. Goes to the Bullets. All hell breaks loose for a couple years. But then when they get Strickland, you know, he's a ball dominant point guard. And as we found out with Weber in later years, like the best kind of offense for him was run the offense through Weber, have guys who can play off him. When he gets to the Kings, that team they built around him was the perfect Chris Webber team with Vlade as another passing big guy, White Chocolate, then Bibby, guards who can play off him, some shooters. And that was the recipe. And unfortunately for him, it took 6 solid years for him to get to the right team, which sometimes it happens. That's why House and I, we just feel like if you do his career 20 times, this is probably the worst version of it. You know, where you get his knee injuries, the wrong teams, the wrong era. Everything about it is just the wrong thing for him.
The bummer is if you could have taken Juwan's professionalism and approach and, did a body swap with Weber, that would have been the perfect power forward at that point.
Well, yeah, I'm saying Russillo now, and now he's like, you know, a pretty prominent commentator. And it's funny to hear him calling out guys for things that afflicted him when he played, you know? He's talking about bad decision-making or professionalism or blah, blah, blah. And it's like, you were the worst example of this.
Yeah, but what's he supposed to do? Not point it out? And he's also 47 now, I think. So
I get it. It's just weird.
Right, but you can't do that. That part I'll push back on only because you can't be an analyst and go, well, I made bad passes late in games early in my career, so I'm not going to criticize this guy.
Bring it up once a year.
Once a year, you would like him to say it?
Once a year, be like, hey, man, I get it. I threw some passes into the third row and acted like a dick.
I do want to interject that 96-97 season, he was a 20-10 guy. He was 20 points, 10 rebounds, 4.6 assists, almost 2 blocks, 1.9.
He was great.
And almost and 1.2 steals, 52% from the field, 40% from 3. That's good. That's good.
He was excellent. And we should also mention how ludicrous it was to watch this game that Bernie Bickerstaff's like, I'm going to play George, Juwan, and Chris together.
He gets George out of there quick.
This would be a good idea.
All right, so let's do the game.
These 3 guys.
Are you guys ready to do the game then?
Let's do
the game.
Okay. So,
I'm sorry, Chris Webber. I'm always going to be disappointed how it turned out. You were so fucking talented.
Yeah, I think this is more because you love him, not because you hate him. Yeah.
We love the Fab Five.
No, but this is going to turn into the go those guys trash Chris Webber and all this stuff. We know what's going to happen.
I fucking loved him.
But, yeah.
I'm holding him to a higher standard.
Right.
I think he's honestly one of the most talented forwards I've ever watched in my life. I'm disappointed it didn't work out better.
Right, and he's behind all of those other guys that we mentioned. He's just always going to be behind him when there was a chance that you thought, oh, by the way, that Golden State team that next year going through and looking at that, Mullen only played 25 games, so that was part of the problem. But their record stunk. They had a 24-year-old Luttrell, 28-year-old Hardaway, 31-year-old Mullen. Daniel Marshall was only 21, his second year, and Cycli still only 29. Chris Gatling, a.k.a. all 30 jersey Chris Gatling. Well, I don't need to
but
get into that. But you're right. Like the top 5 or 6 guys.
Go to the year before. Because they win 50 games the year before.
Yeah.
Weber's rookie year, and then they have that series with the Suns. Your guy Barkley, who took it personally because Weber made fun of him in a Nike commercial, or they showed it was Weber dunked
when he
over him
dunks
in a
on
Nike
him.
commercial.
Yeah,
and Barkley scored 56 on him in that series. But go read the guys from the 50-win team. You have that?
Yeah, it's Victor Alexander out of Iowa State. I'm just Luttrell, Billy Owens, full season. Weber plays a full season. Avery Johnson plays a full season.
Hey, that was his breakout year as kind of a decent guy.
Mullen, that's how Mullen ended up on the Pacers because he was always having a hard time staying healthy here.
Yeah.
He'd admit probably not super locked into the nutrition phase.
Right. 50 wins in 94 is like not bad. Because the league was really deep that year. That's an impressive feat.
Dell Demps is on that team.
Oh, wow.
How about that?
Learning how to build a bad roster.
Let's do the game because I'm going to give you some quick hitters and then House, you go wherever you want. If you had never watched basketball before and you watched this game to be like, who's this Michael Jordan guy? You'd be like, okay, he's really good, but apparently the second best player in the world is Calbert Cheaney because early Calbert Cheaney is unstoppable and he's big. And he actually, at certain times, MJ doesn't look like he's doing, it felt like the Bulls are a little bored, so that's part of it too. But Calbert Cheaney looks incredible. And then my other favorite part is Tracy Murray coming in, who is an incredibly talented scorer, who's got this weird, huge, small forward, power forward body. But you're probably screwed if Tracy Murray is setting up your entire offense the whole time. And he treats Kukoc like an injured dad.
Yeah, they had to get Kukoc out of there.
Yeah, like they take Kukoc. That's what's really great about this, Bill, is some of the early things where you're going, oh, this isn't going to work. Okay, we got to change this assignment. Although, House, you're right. They never seem to kind of give up on Rod Strickland trying to post in this. And there's a couple even possessions late where you're like, look, this is just it's a bad Rod Strickland game, unfortunately, for our guy. But you weren't going to be posting Pippen and MJ in a playoff game.
House, watching this game, I was just stunned. Why didn't they run high screens with Weber and Rod Strickland? Why wasn't that the play every single time down the floor? What am I missing?
Is that the solution that you think might have worked? Is that your idea? Well, let me start with this. this is the game with the legendary Michael before the game enjoying a cigar. And there's some question about whether he was sitting on his black Lamborghini as Juwan and Chris came off the bus, or if he went into the Bullets locker room. But either way, the facts are he went in, he had a cigar. He said to Weber and Juwan, "Who's checking me tonight?" They, rather than telling him to go fuck himself, threw Cal Chaney right under the bus, and MJ looked up and gave him a little laugh and said, "See you guys later." Gave him a little chuckle.
Well,
so disrespectful.
Going backwards, because they cover this in The Last Dance this weekend. When MJ, after the 95 season, when he's filming Space Jam that summer, and they build him that little Space Jam bubble, and the NBA player, he brings in all these NBA players to start working out with him. And it's just game after game. And this was the birth of NBA players coming to LA and starting to all play pickup basketball together. But one of his guys was Juwan. And apparently Juwan lived with him that year or that summer. And he was like really close with Juwan, which means he was close with Weber too, because they were close. So he had a relationship with those guys. So for those guys to be like, "Hey, we're going to throw Cal Chaney at you tonight," it really is like covering Cal Chaney in blood and sending him out into the wilderness to get eaten by coyotes. Why would they do that to Cal Chaney?
Who was going to guard him? Because Weber wasn't going to, Juwan wasn't going to 'stand.
I think you just double him. You
double
him
him.
and you let everyone else beat it.
They
It's unbelievable
doubled
they didn't
him.
double him.
I think
It's
the
so
first
stupid.
double comes at 47 minutes of game action.
And it's Chris Weber like just kind of veering toward him
And he scores.
and he just goes by both of them.
By the way, yeah, he turns away from everybody. He turns sideline and then comes back to the hoop. And it's like
I would have been arguing in the huddle which guy should we double off of and just leave wide open alone, Luke Longley or Dennis Rodman. What do you guys think? Let's not guard either of those guys and put 3 guys on Michael
I don't know
Jordan.
why anyone guards Rodman ever in these games. It's one thing to make sure you have a body on him. You got to pay attention because he's just so great at, as we know, anticipating the rebounds. But Rodman does this kind. It's not even pinch post because he's further out on a lot of the catches where he just is waiting to hand it off to somebody, and there'll be a guy that stays up on him. I can't believe this is happening in the 90s. They wouldn't even defend that guy now. You would sag off. You would stay back. I guess you could say, well, the legal defensive rules, but there's at least a way where you could chase a cutter and hard double and ignore him as opposed to getting caught for some sort of illegal defense call then. And they'll keep a guy glued to Rodman.
That's the part I don't remember well enough about the late 90s is what the exact illegal defense rules were, because
you could chase the cutter on those handoffs. Could Rodman hands it off every time? I mean, look, the funny thing about all the Rodman stuff is you forget how dumb some of the offense is with him, where you catch it wide open at the hoop and you whip it out so the crowd cheers. It's so stupid. Like, just go up and make the layup. He has another 2-on-1 where he has a wide open layup lane and he throws it to Longley. And Longley's like, "What the hell are you giving it to me for?" And you could tell that Rodman's like, "What am I doing?" Because then the next time Rodman drives to the hoop. It's the only time he actually tries to drive to the hoop the entire game. But he would get these rebounds and he would throw it back out and then everybody would cheer like crazy. And you're like, or you could have just turned around and made the basket.
It turns out Bernie Bickerstaff might not have been a world-class strategist.
Tactician? No.
But you made the key point about Cal Chaney. If you only... Like if I grabbed somebody at the Ringer who's like 24 and had never seen a basketball game before, and it was just like, watch this game, which guy in the Bullets made 7 all-star teams? They'd be like, it was Cal Chaney, right? The guy was amazing. He could post up.
I'd say Tracy Murray.
Or Tracy Murray. He had Cal Chaney, and it was frustrating because House and I House basically passed Cal Chaney to me. He rooted for him for 5 years. Would talk about, "Oh, Cal Chaney, he's so fucking frustrating. He just disappears. I wish he was more of a man. Like, step up, Cal Chaney." And then Patino ends up signing him. And I remember going to an early Cal Chaney game and being like, wow, this guy's really athletic. He's so I didn't realize he could post up. And then he would just suck for like a month. There was really nobody like him in the 90s who had more gifts.
Are we saying Cal, Jeff Green, Chaney?
Oh,
Is he the OG Jeff Green?
That's an insult to Jeff Green.
It might be.
It really is.
Cal Chaney had this was the conundrum with him. He made the game-winning shot for Indiana and then had the ball in open moments in these playoffs with the potential either a game tie, a shot that would make the game very close, or the game-winning shot in Game 3, and didn't knock him down. And both of them, now he says in Game 3 he was fouled, and there is a hand near his elbow. But the Game 2-3 was wide open. I want to say some nice things about him. He was super athletic. I mean, this is I think what we're all reacting to. He could keep up with MJ. I would say the funny thing about MJ's 55, it was a very quiet 55. Like Marv doesn't even really get excited until they start showing the graphic of where this game ranks in all of his playoff performances.
Marv's at the point with MJ in 97 where you almost have to play with Marv's prostate just to get a rise out of him. Like there's no other thing you can do in the bedroom
MJ
with Marv
fluffer.
with MJ, where it's like, just give me the shocker. That's the only way. The only way you're getting a rise out of it. MJ is like, and Michael Jordan, 37. He's 13 for 18. Like he's just right. It's like Russillo is I give all credit to Russillo. He's the first person to notice this. Marv is so unimpressed at all times.
Yeah, it's my favorite part, perhaps, of going back and watching all these things. Where if this lived in some version today, you think people are anti-Joe Buck, and that Joe Buck thing is past. The amount of people that would be so mad at Marv going, this is the Knicks guy whose team couldn't get past. Like, that's what would be said. I'm not even saying that's necessarily the truth, but you're right. He is so consistently unimpressed. Like, he'll have 30 in a game, and it's beautiful, and there's still like an entire half to go, and it'll be like, MJ responding to a lackluster Game 2 where he just couldn't hit anything, and you're like, why are you still bringing up Game 2? Like, he just scored 30 in 20 minutes. He goes for 14 straight in the fourth quarter here when you start going from like, hey, he's going to have 40 to wait a minute, what is this guy going to end up with? And then you see it, 63, 56. There's now a bunch of 55s for Russillo, MJ in there.
This is like the fourth game we've done where they've thrown up the greatest scoring performances of all time in a playoff game. And Marv's just like, and there's the list. MJ's 63. There's Elgin Baylor. Like it's
you're like, no.
It's Marv, like he's reading bad.
Even then, too, like he mentions Barkley's 56, and he goes, and Chuck with 56. You're like, do you see that MJ's every other name now on this list? And like, there's only two other guys that aren't Jordan. And House, you're right. I don't know if it's us expecting it to be 50 all the time. I mean, we're picking certain games for certain reasons. We're not just running through every MJ game that's most points, but like this is the part where I feel, not that I want to do a huge LeBron MJ deep dive, but every time I watch another one of these games, I go, this is almost kind of silly that we even do this because there's so many hidden clutch shots at like a minute, at 50 seconds left. Like, hey, that's the dagger.
It's always the biggest shot of the game.
It's always the biggest shot. It almost always goes in. And these are lost in the archives because they're not buzzer beaters. And I'll admit, like after this one, I feel like I've just been beaten over the head. It wasn't like I was saying LeBron was better than MJ, but the more you go through these, the dumber even suggesting it feels.
And I will say I was struck by how unimpressed I was with the rest of the Bulls. So MJ, the Bulls
bad Pippen game. No, it isn't, but that's been the theme of these. I don't know what's
happening. We had the one we did Tuesday. He was actually great in that game. So at least we got one in.
The Bulls scored 23 points in the fourth quarter. MJ had 20 of them. Now the other three
14 straight. Yeah.
Was a Pippen 3. That was a huge, meaningful Pippen 3 with like, what was it, 2 minutes left?
Huge shot. Yeah.
Well, and then
huge shot.
The MJ closer, the Bullets cut it to 3. It's 50 seconds left. They run clock off. And Bernie finally is like, hey, we should double him. We should double MJ, get the ball out of his hands. They send a terrible double. MJ just immediately breaks it, which he does over and over again in these games we watch, where he's almost insulted when you double him. Just gets by both. He's like it's almost like a special teams gunner when they put the two guys on him, and he's just like, oh, cool, and just gets by both of them, and then does this double clutch bank layup to basically end the game. The crazy thing, though, they show the shot chart. I put it on my Twitter today where he makes 22 shots. He only makes 1 3, and it's all mid-range stuff. And I think just for the spirit of the Rewatchable series, we should mention, like, his game had evolved now. He's not really doing the going to the rim, blowing by people, changing hands in midair, layups in traffic or little floaters. These are all like kind of what the part of MJ that Kobe would really end up stealing. These methodical 18-footers and Kyle Chaney, who was really good defensively, over and over again. Like, he's jumping, and MJ had mastered that thing at this point where it looks like he's going to shoot the jumper, and the guy jumps, and he's just got complete control of the basketball, and then shoots it a second later, and just these tricks. And it's really interesting watching this game. This one, he really reminded me of Kobe, or I should say Kobe reminded me of MJ because MJ did it first, but it's all the Kobe blueprint that he would steal for the mid-late 2000s.
Yeah, and there's a stretch where you're going, okay, well, MJ's just kind of keeping him in it. Not a shock here. We saw this a lot. Washington shoots 20 free throws the first 8 or 9 minutes of the second quarter to 0 for Chicago.
Right. They show the graphic.
Okay? 20 free throws, 0 for Chicago. And they have 65 points at the half, which is a pretty big number against a Bulls team. Again, it's a 69-win Bulls team. Probably should have won 70 again. Had a little bit of a leak in there. The problem. I also thought there was a moment too where, and I wasn't going to go back and like read the injury report on it or anything like that, but Chaney kind of pushes MJ on a putback early in the game, and MJ lands awkwardly, and he's pissed. And he's pissed because Chaney does push him, but it's one of those things that easily is missed because you're looking at other things, and he gets him lower in the back, and MJ kind of lands. And anytime MJ takes a step that isn't the most graceful thing you're ever going to see, I was like, oh, did he do that thing where you land weird and you're back? It's not like I can't play, but now I have this little tweak thing the whole time. And then he scores 55 points. So, because, it's the same thing with Rodman. Like, you're watching, you go, oh, he had this knee ligament thing. He missed, I think, the last 13 games. He doesn't start game 1. He's terrible in the first half. And then you go, okay, but now he's running around like crazy and he's totally engaged. It's just always trying to figure out the magnitude of what something could be. And, again, I overreacted to watching that clip and thinking about it, but it just didn't matter because you're right. Maybe that's why he wasn't driving, or I don't know if there was ever anything talked about that he potentially hurt himself there a little bit because he just methodically beat on this Washington team. And it turned into a game where when he scores those 14 straight in the fourth quarter, everybody's watching him and he's still just doing it to everybody. Like, it's not like a ton of cuts. It's not like he's coming off of screens. It's not like, there's certain stretches too where you could see once BJ Armstrong comes along, BJ is setting up a lot of the offense in some of those earlier teams, and it's weird to watch MJ off the ball after he was so ball dominant in 91. And then with Harper, there's different things. But this game, it's just like, look, I'm going to veteran you to death, and there's really not going to be anything you can do. And I do think that's a little difference or the great example of the gear that we know exists and the Bullets not knowing that gear exists.
So that's a great point that I want to pick up on that applies equally to the team defense that Chicago played in the third quarter when they effectively won the game. Yeah. It is the difference between a veteran team that understands how, as a group, to ratchet up the pressure, that has a coach that trusts them, that they all know their roles. They get slightly more physical. This is the era, and I got pissed watching this in the third quarter, when the Bulls got a lot of benefit of the doubt. Now, we talked about the free throw discrepancy in the second quarter. The refs make up for it when it becomes winning time for the Bulls when they get themselves back in it. But it's really the defensive intensity. The Bullets shot 6 of 22 in the third quarter, scored 15 points in the third quarter, and that's because the Bulls were in their underwear the entire quarter.
House and I talked about this. We did Game 2 Orlando 1996 on my podcast on Tuesday, and we were saying, like, the most underrated thing about this Bulls run, both the first 3 and then the second 3, was their ability to, for an entire quarter, just completely destroy a team defensively. And they could do it. It's really underrated how well they did it in the early 90s too, because I think especially the 91 team, that team is so young and athletic, and Jordan and Pippen are they're just at the peak athletic powers. They were able to do this in 96 and 97 specifically, where those guys could summon it for a quarter. And I said to House on Tuesday, it was honestly like watching two Kawhis. Like if you clone Kawhi, you were just
really,
like,
yeah.
If you clone Kawhi and you were like, Kawhi, for this quarter, just see how many steals you and evil twin Kawhi can get. We're going to do a full court press. See if you can get 10 steals. And they would just go and take the ball from people. And they did it in this game where it's just like, all right, we need to create some offense from our defense. And they just did. There's just never been anything like that specific tool in the shed that they had.
So as House had said that third quarter, because I think you could, if you went along and did a rewatchable with us on this one, you're going, well, wait a minute. It's still like a possession or two possession game late in this game. How could it be decided in the third quarter? I agree with you. Like watching it, that's when it went, oh, wait, okay. Because it was 8 or 9 straight misses by the Bullets in that stretch. And there's one position I write down where Weber gets it isolated with Rodman one-on-one. And I think Rodman gets too much credit for shutting down Weber when there's just not assigned to him as much as people remember.
Yeah.
That's something I kept going, be like, oh, he's on Juwan again. But Weber had drove on Rodman before, and Rodman got into him and just fell down. And it's just a car crash.
Right.
And Rodman gets called for the foul. But I don't know if Weber's going, I don't want to do that again. And so then Weber doesn't attack at all on Rodman. And then Strickland gets stuck in the post trying to like left block Jordan, work him in the post. Jordan just swallows him. And Strickland's like, let me get it out of here. And you're going, Rod's the vet, but that's the team that's not used to these possessions going, that's what I always think about a great point guard. A great point guard goes, okay, we've had 7 or 8 shitty possessions in a row here. Who do I need to can get rolling? And then Tracy Murray's thinking like, I'm gonna come to the rescue, and then that's a problem. You don't really know how to set up Juwan. This is not Apex Mountain Legs. Calbert's still not somebody who's going to break somebody. Well, Legs has an appearance in this one, and he's actually chasing MJ around for a little while, but he's got a massive knee brace on, and Legs has better runs than this one. But it's just a very tough offense in that moment to go, do you guys realize what's happening to you right now? Like, we need somebody to step up here and make the right decisions. And once the Strickland thing can't go, their default is a major problem. And as you know, you watch all these games, but
I was impressed that he was even breaking the press the number of times that he did. I do think one of the things with this Bulls team in the 90s, if you didn't have an awesome ball handler, they were just going to annihilate you. And I think the Knicks felt that with some of the point guards they had. Like when Phoenix, when like Frank Johnson comes in, they're like, oh, Frank Johnson's in, let's go get him. And same thing with Orlando.
Well, when Whitney comes in this game, there's a terrible possession, and then they full court press Whitney, and he breaks it. But there's like couple Whitney possessions where you can see that Doberman defense. They just attack.
The Doberman defense is a good way to put it. With the Orlando game, House and I did, it actually made me think less of Penny Hardaway. Because I always thought like, oh yeah, he's a 6'8" guy, could handle like magic. It's like, actually, no, he could barely dribble over midcourt against these guys. But I think that really made them so special, their ability to ratchet it up like that.
So
go ahead, House. All right. Well, I'll just finish with this real quick. The Knicks stuff was the most alarming. And I don't know, if anybody's kept track of it, it'd be kind of pointless. But the amount of trapping that they did against the Knicks guards, that almost made me think like, hey, they're even less equipped to deal with us than other teams are. Because against Phoenix, they would kind of pick their spots a little. And I have to think that like Kevin Johnson, better ball handler, and that Barkley's like a really good outlet ball handler for a bigger guy. But you could see with different teams, they were like, well, no, we can actually press more. Like the amount of pressing they do in some of those Knicks games, I can't believe a pro team is doing it as often and as hard as they are doing it in a playoff game.
And that's why the 92 Cavs series, which was, there's this feeling that the Bulls just ripped through everybody. You go back and look at that 92 Cavs series. It's really tight. It's really hard fought. Game 6 is in Cleveland. Doherty got hurt, I think, before Game 6, and Price was also hurt. And yet it's a tie game with 35 seconds left, and MJ wins it. But Price was another guy that, they couldn't totally do the Doberman defense on because he was such a good ball handler. And then you saw it with Stockton in Utah. Those 2 finals. that was the one guy you don't press this guy. It's a mistake. So they would kind of wait till Howard Isley came in and then they would do their thing on that.
So the aspect of it that tears my heart out, and it especially relates to what we're talking about right now, which is the lack of seasoning in effect. The only two real ballers on this Bullets team in terms of guys who've been some places and done some things are Strickland and Tracy Murray.
Oh, Murray, yeah.
But like up to the moment, both of those guys, and watching it, I can put myself right back in this seat. I was like, we're going to lose, but I kind of don't even mind. This is a young team. All these guys are around 23, 24, 25 years old. This is the seasoning that I want for this young nucleus. I want these guys who I'm going to have a nice 5 to 6 year run with to play the very best team at their very best level and learn these lessons and take the lumps and turn all of that into the positive for the next season. And everything went to hell, of course. But, that was the set feeling I had watching it. I didn't even really mind the beating that they were taking because it was an important beating for them to take.
Russillo, can I make an MJ 55-point game point?
Yeah.
He goes 22 for 35. They take 78 shots total, so he takes almost 50% of their shots. He also goes 10 for 10 from the line. 22 for 35, 10 for 10 from the line. I never felt at any point, and I watched every second, that he was either hogging the ball or taking bad shots. I liked every shot he took in this game. There's a couple near the end of the shot clock where he just had to get off a bad fall away. But it never had that sense of, oh man, fucking MJ's. The other guys might as well not even be here. The ball's moving around. It's just like it was always the best decision for him to shoot. And then the shots he was getting were just always good shots. It's really weird to watch a 35 field goal game and think that the guy's not hogging the ball. But I am I wrong? I honestly didn't feel like he was hogging the ball.
I feel like we say this now after every one of these games, though. And now I'm wondering, did we process it the wrong way in the moment? Because that was one of the things. Like, oh, okay, well, how many shots did he take? Like, he actually, there were still dissenters going, all right, MJ. I mean, this guy's got rings in his back pocket. And like, whatever, he just gets a bunch of calls. And, that's the kind of stuff that happens because not everybody's going to be 100% on it. But there's, I think, 2 or 3 shots that have no chance, but they feel like they're shot clock bailout deals where if you take those away, it's even more absurd. So, yes, when they say he scored 14 straight points in the fourth quarter, I was surprised. I went, wait, he has? He's just got all these buckets. And sometimes that can get slowed down, like with the free throws, and you have to go back and be like, oh, okay, well, 6 points were on free throws, so it wasn't like shot the whole time. But he probably should be remembered more. Well, no one's going to call him selfish when you're winning this many games, but I almost feel like all of that stuff that was in it, we knew it was inaccurate back then. It's like even more inaccurate now. Like watching it now, it's just it's constantly in the flow. And
he's not ball dominant like a Harden or a Westbrook now, where those guys are taking 35 shots, but it just feels like they're dominating every ounce of oxygen of the offense. I never felt. It sounds like we're just in the bag for MJ, but I just don't feel that way. House, did you feel that way watching it?
For sure. Part of it is because the Bulls kick the Bullets' ass on the offensive boards. They get so many extra chances. And in a lot of the instances, MJ is not the first option. So the reason that it feels like it came in the flow is because it came in the flow. It wasn't MJ dribbling the ball up, pounding it for 11 seconds, and then trying to make something happen. They ran their offense. They had option A. For whatever reason, option A got foreclosed. They took a shot, offensive rebound, then MJ scored off of that. Or, option A didn't work. Option B was MJ with the shot clock, winding down. And he definitely was in rhythm. I mean, the stroke was sick. There are a couple of those that go in that they barely touched the net. But that's why it felt so comfortable, I think.
Russillo, we just got to do this really quickly. We should put a time limit on it. You and I are in the camp of the Rodman thing was way less interesting than it seems now all these years later, if you can make a nice little cool montage and documentary about it. We're talking last 25 years only. So 90, by the time he gets to the Bulls on, you could feel it in this game. It was like, yeah, he got kicked out of the first game. He's playing with a bad knee. They interview Weber at the beginning of this game, and Weber's like, just goes, yeah, I don't care. He's a 36-year-old man acting like a little kid. Everyone was already tired of the Rodman thing, and we're not even at the Last Dance season yet. I think it's really important for people to remember this. I know it's cool. I know he went to Vegas and he got hair and he dated Madonna, all that stuff. But by the time we got into the second Bulls season, we were all kind of over it. It wasn't as fun anymore. It really wasn't. I'm telling you, it was not as fun.
I'm not going to debate with somebody that was 0 years old about this. I'm just not. And like you could see he's just a non-factor, and because he's on the bench and then he's mad, and what like you don't understand is how I guess I'm surprised people don't see it, but like there are true thespians on the court, right? Where every single LeBron has a lot of that in him, where every reaction, because he's been on stage, he's been in the spotlight since he was like 14, 15 years old, that there's a little rehearsed to him, where like every time LeBron would get hit, he would touch his face. He went through a massive flopping, weird, I'm hurt phase. But then as you get older, you're like, I don't want to waste all my energy on falling down all the time, pretending I was fouled, right? And so Rodman had that. It was this theatrical performance the whole time. So when he felt like he was being left out, he gets a technical in the first half. And it's a stupid technical. It doesn't really mean anything. I think technicals, for the most part, are incredibly selfish because when you're going to get one. And I don't care, like you get a few here or there, but like when you want to get them all the time, it's like, okay,
well, that
cool,
one, he does the clap at the refs, which is like guaranteed to get a tech every time.
Right. And then he acts like, I can't believe I got the tech, like the woe is me, look at me, and the whole thing. I just can't argue with anybody that wasn't old enough then or just thinks that
it just got tiresome.
People, like that's why
it just did.
That's why the Lakers thing was a disaster, because at that point it's like, so what do you care about? Like, what do you care about? But I don't know. I mean, it doesn't. We are in the minority on this one. Nobody wants to hear it from us. Clearly,
we're not in the minority on this one because I think a lot of the people that actually lived through it. We never asked House though. House, were you like just delighted by the whole Dennis Rodman thing by the time we got to these 3 Bulls seasons? Because it was, on the one hand, the game we did on Tuesday, the '96 thing. He was awesome in that game.
Yes.
And I really do think he brought the best out of, like the ceiling of him was just higher than Horace Grant because he was just such an electric player and he could guard all these different positions. But, he also brought a lot of baggage too. And I did think it kind of overpowered the team every once in a while in not a good way.
I'm just going to make the observation that I thought that the minutes he played in this game in the second half were meaningful, and that his impact in the third quarter was, he was an important part of the defensive clampdown and the energy that they showed defensively and his physicality. Russillo, you mentioned it. Weber drove hard on Rodman, got a blocking call on Rodman, but it hurt. It hurt Weber to do that. And because Rodman made him pay the price for it because of his physicality. And Weber chose not to do that again. He had the option to do it again, and he chose not to.
It wasn't even this hard foul either. It was just that I'm gonna let you run me over. You're gonna get the call, but you're gonna end up flailed out yard sale style here, and it's gonna suck. And you're gonna have to get back up. And then you can see like Weber, and this is the part about Rodman that's positive. That's the competitive part of him, where he's like, I know what I'm doing. And then he got right up and followed Weber around. And Weber just wasn't really like, it was going to bother Weber for a few possessions, and Rodman knew what he was doing. So it was
not
good.
About that roughneck life.
No. And as bad as the first half was, Rodman absolutely, with his energy, he gets a couple rebounds, and you can see, all right, now I'm in it. And then he dives on the floor in the paint, and they're all over the place for the basketball. And then he's getting up. And that's the thing with Rodman. Like, he needed to know it was almost he was being appreciated, whether it was his teammates or the crowd. And then you would actually get that version out of him that you needed. But it's a very interesting Rodman game in that because he's so detached, he's mad, he goes back, he changes the brace.
He's definitely not healthy. Yeah.
That's right.
Right. But because of all of these factors and him not being a part of it, like you could see this complete 180 turn with just his effort level and his emotion, and he's a big part of that third quarter run.
The other guy who just keeps losing every time I watch these old Bulls games for me is Kukoc, who Zach Lowe is very pro Kukoc. Whatever. I think what we thought, what we wanted
is such a dismissive whatever.
Well, it's like, I think what we thought he was in our heads, he just wasn't. You
It's
think
a
like,
non-factor
oh man,
in this game.
he was this
They have to get him out of there.
Yeah, he was like, oh man, he could shoot threes and he was such a wonderful passer. He could post up. It's like, yeah, but he didn't really do that stuff that often. And
He went 1 for
defensively,
10
was
in
a
game 1 too.
Yeah, defensively is a train wreck. In the 96 playoffs, he missed like almost every three he took. And, I think his career post Bulls, where he should have been hitting his like peak, and it speaks for itself. Like he just was not really an impact guy. I think he was very lucky to be along for the ride with this Bulls team.
Little like early 90s Dario Saric.
Oh yeah, that's it. Dario Saric is a good example though, because he was in our lives on that Philly team. We're like, oh, that guy, and then he goes to Phoenix, and he's never heard from again. I got to mention one more thing to you guys that I had in my notes. That's very important. There were multiple ads for the River Wild, which was showing on NBC that night.
After Third Rock.
And if Marv had sold MJ's 55-point performance even 1/10 as hard as he sold the River Wild, this would have been a great YouTube clip. It's like the River Wild, an extraordinary performance by Meryl Streep. And it's like, what are you talking about? It's a fucking River Wild. Why are you making this seem like it's an Academy
I saw that in the
Award winner?
theater. That's back when like Kevin Bacon were like, hey, we need a weirdo. What is he? He's a raft guide. All right, Kevin Bacon.
The best thing about these rewatchables games have been the commercials for me. Out of everything else, the mid '90s, the shoe commercials, the Shaq and
halftime
Penny
shows.
Juwan Howard had a commercial. Did you see that?
For reading.
Yeah, he had
Right.
one. Just like
Big reader.
the early Subway, those ads, some of the old beer ads. Like
Beer
that,
ads are great.
It was a weird era for Nike. They were. It was kind of post MJ. They were trying to turn all these guys into characters and get way more creative. It wasn't really totally working, but it was just fun. I really enjoyed it.
I had the pennies. I had switched over. I was all in on all the pennies to play. They were my favorite shoes to play in. Even though I loved Barkley, it was just my game did not match Barkley's shoes.
Remember when New Balance put out those light ones? And I was like the first kid on my block with the super light New Balance. I was so happy. It was my dream to have light basketball sneakers. I had been passionate about it all through college. Why are these things so heavy? Why are they like boots? Why do they weigh 10 pounds? I just never got it. And then it was like, oh my God, these New Balances, they were so awesome. Now all those shoes, those New Balance shoes,
that's
were
what the
way ahead of
pennies-
their time.
Yeah, the pennies were
light.
really light, and I loved them. Like I wore them out. And back then, it was the kind of thing where it was like, even though in school, how you end up like being broker in college than you are like when you were in high school. Like that was legitimately like fair. I was so broke towards the end. I was selling CDs. I remember one time I called home, was like, hey, I'm not going to be able to ride it out the rest of my month. My dad's like, I don't care. Like, figure it out. Like, there's nothing coming from here.
Did I ever tell you what me and House used to do for food? We would go to Papa Gino's.
No, but I can't wait.
Papa Gino's.
Papa Gino's.
All
Shout
you
out
can
to,
eat.
Are you kidding?
2 different all-you-can-eat nights. One was all-you-can-eat pasta, which I think was Mondays. And then I think Wednesdays was all-you-can-eat pizza.
That's
and
right.
It was like $9.99 all-you-can-eat, which I think House single-handedly ended. By like 91, Papa Gino's was like, we're losing like a ton of money on this all-you-can-eat thing. House would just keep going back and getting more and more pizza. He would stack it on top. He would get scolded by the Papa Gino's guys. Excuse me, can you only take one slice at a time, please?
Well, because I made one plate too tall and dropped a couple slices. They didn't like that. They were mad at me for that.
And then the pasta, they would just like they would make it in bulk. So they would put like, what was it, like MSG or chemicals. So we would all be in like a coma after. But yeah,
they gave us small bowls. So
it was the all-you-can-eat era.
In a tiny
that
bowl.
was the thing. That's right, because they would start. Like we had the all-you-can-eat deals where it was pizza and wings at one place called Manhattan Pizza up at UVM, And what would happen is, they would be great. They bring you over a full pie for your table, buckets of wings, different sauces, the whole thing. And once you were labeled as like a real rabble rouser or a guy trying to break the system, they'd come over like 2 individual wings in your little wing bucket. And then you'd eat those, and you'd have to keep ordering.
You wings.
Yeah. So it was like, look, we'll keep playing the game if you guys want to, but we're gonna start bringing these things out individually pretty soon.
What was the other place, House? What was the place we went to that had the all-you-can-eat wings when we watched Bullets Celtics, and you had like 120 wings?
The Ground Round.
Yeah, the Ground Round was another one.
Loved it.
That
Ground
special
Round
ended quickly.
The Ground Round, depending on which one you would hit, not a terrible experience.
Great
right?
wings.
Fair.
Great wings at the
And
Shrewsbury
popcorn.
Ground Round.
Popcorn.
Oh, and
Remember they had
popcorn,
the
that's
big
right.
popcorn thing, and you could just it was free popcorn.
Old movies.
As soon as you hit the door, you can have popcorn. Like, I love a place where as soon as you walk in, you can start eating something. I mean, that's a lifelong.
Also, remember the smell? It smelled like popcorn because the popcorn machine was giant. So we'd walk in and House would go, oh, it was like Robert Duvall smelling the napalm in the morning. It's like, oh, popcorn.
Remember they used to
great
have
times.
those old school like drop down screens too, the original projector
Oh,
for
yeah.
the Ground Round. So like that was huge for me as a kid. You'd be
We
like,
used,
okay, I'm
to
gonna
watch
watch some.
we used to watch basketball there
Yeah,
because
we
it
could-
was like actually the biggest TV in the radius for us. Great times.
It makes
I
sense.
could
Great
do I
times.
could do early
Makes
90s. Then the funniest thing was House got a job at a pizza place in was it Auburn?
No, I didn't work at the pizza place. I worked at a industrial
Greek-
goods place.
No, you got a job at
Dry
a food
goods?
place for like 2 weeks.
Did I?
There's no way I'm misremembering this.
I don't remember it. I don't think I ever worked in a food place.
You worked at like
It's
a
a
Greek
bad
pizza
idea.
place.
Did
I think that's why you quit because you kept eating.
I don't remember it, but
Yeah, no, you definitely did. You blocked
All
some
right.
stuff out in college.
sure, I had to.
Russillo, House lived. There was an Indian food place called the Annapurna in Worcester on campus. House lived on the top floor over the Indian food place. So him and his 2 roommates, they just stunk of Indian food
That's a
for his
that's a
entire senior year.
that's a
and needless to
falsehood.
say,
That's a fabrication.
House not hooking up a lot during a lot of that stretch because it was like, oh, that guy smells like chicken tiki marsala.
That's false. I did not smell like that food. I smelled, but I
did.
didn't smell like the food. Our apartment sometimes caught that, but we were on the top. We could open up to the the
House.
roof. We had the rooftop access.
House,
It
you're
was
so
the
wrong.
rooftop access, by the way, was very
Rooftop
good
in
with the
Worcester?
ladies.
Yeah,
Yes.
when you moved out by the end of the semester?
You had to climb up a
House
ladder.
is so wrong. You know, like
I-
when you have like a parent or a relative that has a dog that pees in their house and they can't smell the pee anymore. And then you go and you're like, your house smells like pee. And they're like, no, it doesn't. It's like, all right, I'm not making this up. I'm not snatching this out of thin air for no
I'm
reason.
not arguing that the apartment sometimes took on.
You got used to the smell. It was right up. You were right above it.
But look, it was the trade-off was worth it. This was something that a roommate of mine did. I never did this, but I had a roommate who would invite girls to come sometimes and then say, "Oh, let's go up to the roof. We can go look at the stars at night." And for girls
roofs are great.
in skirts,
are-
my roommate would let them climb up the ladder first. He had to climb up a ladder. And, this was pre-Me Too. I mean, this was like in the 80s. Come on.
I'm afraid of
I did not do this.
This
just for the
podcast. I thought
record.
we were going to get a little dangerous some of the Weber criticisms. Now I'm not even sure I want to be associated with this podcast anymore. It's my own.
Roof looks classic house. Yeah, roofs and decks were such a big thing in the early 90s. I don't
Very
know if
big.
that's still the case, but we had no internet back then. You get somebody to have like nice little life talk on the roof. Remember
That's it.
at 20 Compton, we had the open the window and you could go sit on the roof, and that
There
was
you go.
that was a big thing. All right, sorry for the tangent, Russillo.
No, that's great. This is
No, this is
those New Balances though.
Yeah,
I like the new ones. All right,
yeah,
good
I'm
stuff.
not proud of it.
Talk to you guys later.
Bye, Russillo.
Thanks, Russillo. Thanks for letting me crash.